Hello. Welcome to another episode of Season 16 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season, the theme is B movies for C students. We're taking a break from the current trends toward elevated horror and examining the history of horror B movies and how they've developed over time. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Well, I guess this is the week we talk about blaxploitation.
Yes, sir.
It's been a good run, folks.
We'll see y'all after we're canceled.
Right.
I'm just kidding.
No, I have to start off by admitting that I was just completely and totally wrong about this subgenre of film.
Oh.
Like, I really thought it was a thing that white people made on a low budget out of, like, racist leanings
like
to try...
exploitation?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
To try and, like, attract a different demographic to the theaters or something. I thought it was, like, very, like, lowbrow and pandering. And, you know, thusly mostly racist and embarrassing. And so I was just totally expecting to start this episode off by talking about, like, how did the actors feel about being in it after the fact and what were their attitudes looking back and everything. But it turns out I was just completely and totally wrong. Blaxploitation was really a term given to a film movement that was outside of Hollywood that was made up by mostly black actors and filmmakers and just had its own, like, traditions and tropes, just like any other subgenre that was its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, a lot of the stereotypical depiction of black people in these movies is, like, tongue-in-cheek. Like, it's meant to be social commentary, or it's, like, making fun of stereotypes that white people have. And so I just really did not realize that. Like, this whole time I was like, oh, God, this movie's going to be real. I'm going to feel dirty watching it. But it was like, oh, going into it knowing this, there's actually a lot of really funny stuff in this movie.
Yeah. No, I think that's the thing, too. And I've seen I've seen a few, like, just over the years randomly. Tubi you could thank Tubi for that, probably. But no, I definitely had, like, more of a similar feeling. And when I selected, like, I was, like, debating if I wanted to, and I was like, you know what, like, if it's a thing, like, we can't just not talk about things. And so I was like, no, I want to see, like, I've never seen it. I want to see it. Like, let's just see what it's about. That was relieved more relieved while watching it, knowing, like, okay, this is all legit. Like, it's just, like, especially in the season that we're in, B movies for C students, like, that's what we're here for, to learn about these. Well,
that's what took me by surprise, was because it's like these low budget kind of maybe more less polite movies.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting, like, elevated like, social commentary.
Mm-hmm.
But in reading about it, Blacula had a black director, and he worked with the leading actor to rewrite the script and make sure that the role was more dignified than, I guess, in, like, the original screenplay. And apparently the soundtrack being more, like, funky was also characteristic of these types of movies, whereas, like, a lot of traditional horror films would have more, classical type scores. So the musical piece of it was a lot more typical of, like, blaxploitation films, but also of music that, like, the black community would have grown up listening to and stuff. So there's all this stuff around it with this one. But another thing I read was that a theme of these movies tends to be inclusion and equality, and it's not just based on race. So you'll notice that in the beginning, like, the two interior decorators were gay men, but that didn't really matter to the story at all. And no one said anything bad about them except the white cop that you weren't supposed to like anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, like, this movie also shows black women working in STEM and technically passes the Bechdel test, which none of that sounds like really, like, shocking in 2024. But for 1972, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I mean, 10 years out from, the civil rights movement, like, this is a huge thing. And, I think just being able to develop a community is really important in itself, but the fact that it's kind of it kind of took on it to be its own thing. Not saying that Blacula like created, the blaxploitation movement or anything like that. And not saying that that movement wasn't exploited down the road or anything, but it was just, I like the universe of it. Like you and I have talked, I know in person, especially when we were watching Star Wars. That's right, everyone. I've seen it.
Finally.
Turns out Darth Vader. Just kidding. So, like we were talking, like I really like the universe of things. So like even the Marvel universe, like I just like how you develop your own world. Like I've always liked that, but I like this. I mean, even, to having the Hughes Corporation, which was the woman and the two men singers at the club they were at. That's the actual group. And just seeing all that kind of come together, I was there for it. Yeah, I wasn't liking the film just to like it, but I was just like, this is what we're here for this season. Like this is what we're here for. Just off, just humor that's a little off, dialogue is a little gnarly, budget's a little low, acting's a little rough, but by God, there's a story behind this. And
yeah, and I think there were a lot of little things that you could appreciate in this movie if you understand that full background of it that wouldn't have necessarily stood out otherwise. But this most definitely was not the first blaxploitation film. It is often credited, though, for kicking off the blaxploitation horror subgenre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and this was like a horror movie. It was distributed by American International Pictures, which was the one we talked about with The Raven. And in that episode, we talked about Samuel Z. Arkoff and his Arkoff formula for making movies that appealed to teenagers. And he was actually a producer on this film as well. And so it's kind of interesting that, now, however many years later, you would have thought of those movies as being kind of lowbrow and, catering to teenagers and not making a social statement and stuff. Whereas, this is now part of that too, which is kind of interesting. So anyway, all that to say, this one feels very relevant to the larger story of B movies that we're telling this season. And I'm excited to get into it with you. Go ahead and pull up that picture.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then we'll get into the, damn, that backup singer sure had a Glock in his pocket, didn't he? Details.
That's for damn sure. Eesh.
In 1972, American International Pictures brought us Blacula, a blaxploitation vampire horror film directed by William Crane. This movie stars William Marshall as an African prince who has a run-in with the infamous Count Dracula in the late 1700s that leaves him trapped in a sealed coffin for 150 years. After two hip young men buy all of Dracula's estate to resell in the hot LA antiques market, Blacula is unleashed on the Golden State with bloody consequences. This movie didn't do great with critics, but it was a box office success, bringing in almost $2 million. It can currently be streamed for free with ads on Tubi.
Perfect. Do you know how I picked this movie out?
I actually was just about to ask.
Yeah. So strictly, first off, I thought I was picking for the 80s, and then I had the movie that we already done. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm picking for the 70s. And I was like, what came out in the 70s? I'm looking kind of through a list. And I remember there's an episode of a TV show called Psych. And for a Halloween episode, Gus, one of the main characters, dresses up as Blacula for Halloween. And like he's just saying all these like quotes and everything from it. And like the show is like a cable TV show, and it's, I would consider almost innocent, like kind of like buddy cop kind of humor kind of thing. And so I knew that it couldn't be anything, like it wouldn't be too much, because like if they're referencing this a lot on like this show, then like it has to be kind of legit. And the actor that plays Gus is, I think he's kind of religious and stuff. So I was like, I don't think he would anyway. And so it just took me back, and I was like, I gotta I got to select it for this alone. I got to finally watch Blacula just to know what they were talking about in the episode. So that was it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't even aware that this movie existed, to be completely honest. So
nice.
It was, kind of surprising to me. And then when I started reading more about it, I was just like, oh, this is actually really interesting and a great pick for this season. So well done.
Thanks.
But, yeah, so this one, it definitely is rooted in sort of the more classic Dracula tale and starts off with, I guess, the fictional prince Mamuwald-y, who is meeting Count Dracula for some reason, and then they get into a big fight, and then Dracula bites him and sucks his blood, turning him into a vampire, and then locks him inside a coffin in a hidden room with the wall built up over it. So they'll have to spend eternity lusting for blood inside a sealed coffin in the dark. And that was one of the most disproportionate responses to a political debate I think I've ever seen on film. I mean, that was a pretty good, because the prince was like, "Sir, I find your cognac as distasteful as your manner." And I was like, damn, that's a sick burn. And then he's like, yeah, I'm going to turn you into a vampire and seal you inside a coffin for the rest of your life, so you'll always lust for blood and never have any. And I'm like, okay, he wins. That is the sicker burn. Yeah.
I'll be honest, when this movie opens and it's back in the 1700s and it's going, I actually was I think I was expecting less with this movie, and then when I saw it going on, I was like, oh well, this is better than what I expected. And so I was just in from that point. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be for the better. I thought it was an interesting origin story of how that would come about.
Yeah.
One side of me was like, or you could just kill him, man, and you get it over with. But he's like, no,
he insulted my cognac. There are consequences. I'm
going to teach him a lesson, and he's going to live potentially for the rest of his life attracting people. Anyway. But yeah, I thought that was definitely an interesting start.
Yeah, and it was kind of that same thing where we've talked about that horror movies do a good job of, is you have kind of that crazy, intense opening scene, and then that kind of puts you on edge for all the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And that's a good way of setting up a horror movie, because it sets the tone and then gives you time to reset and develop characters and stuff. But even with this one, he was almost immediately out of the coffin and attacking people again. And so I thought generally it handled the pace pretty well, even though some of the stuff in the story didn't make a lot of sense. And, at the end of the day, this was still a low budget B movie. The acting wasn't great outside of Blacula, and the costuming was pretty goofy. Why did Blacula get Joe Dirt facial hair whenever he was attacking people? It just didn't make any sense to me.
I don't know. I actually couldn't explain it whatsoever. But in the episode, in Psych, the TV show that I was referencing, it's like that.
That's great.
And so that's all I could see. It was just it looks like it was done the same, glued on pubes. Just poor guy.
Yeah. But go ahead.
Sorry. What I've kind of noticed, so far with this season leading up to it, and I don't know the exact reasoning behind it, but I feel like some of the ways you can kind of tell, we talk about with budget or with B movies, the budget is generally lower. We've gone through that. What I've kind of noticed is it's almost like the editing might be some of the places that they try to save money at, because you have hard cuts and hard and with this one you for sure had quite a few of those, but that's it. I saw a couple, I'm just like, whoa, did my DVD just skip? This is what I was kind of thinking, because I was I felt like it just jumped, and I was like, no, you rewind, go back, and it was just a hard edit. And I have made some videos in the past, and one of the first things I learned early on was just trying to make all transitions smooth, as smooth as possible. Technology was way different back then. It's done a lot different now, obviously, but that's what I've kind of noticed, where it's like I can't really. Sometimes, obviously, special effects, you can tell. I don't know how much actors get paid. I don't know anything about that. I don't know how much it honestly costs to actually make a film. But that was the thing I kind of noticed throughout these films. You got a few hard edits. Those poor editors cost so much damn money, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, like you would expect from a lower budget movie, I feel like there were really big ups and downs. So like this one had some great scenes where like the setup was really good, and you have, you know, the recently reanimated vampire woman running down the hospital of the morgue, and it's just like super intense and scary in that moment, or that big showdown in the warehouse where all of the previous victims start showing up to attack. And the like choreography and the action of that I thought was really good, but then the costuming was kind of so ridiculous that it took away from it a little bit.
Yeah,
you know, with like the plastic fangs and stuff. It was just like, okay, well,
like the
this
green
is like, you don't have to be great, you just can't be that bad.
Yeah. But then it had like that funky like wah wah music playing in the background for it. It's just like, I don't care what's happening right now. I'm here for this funky guitar groove we're listening to.
Well, and that the soundtrack really did give this one a unique element. Because I feel like so many of these, they're just using kind of like the copy paste, like background classical movie score. Because obviously, I guess that was a way to save money. But with this one, the soundtrack was memorable and notable and actually added something to the movie. And so it was different because I think it was more like in line with the blaxploitation movie traditions, I guess, than like sort of the standard horror movie traditions. But different's okay. I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, when did they start putting, you know, non-orchestra music in movies, or, you know, kind of thing. Like, I don't know when that was the case, but, you know, what I'm wondering is, could blaxploitation, or having, you know, films like this that have decent soundtracks, be one of the reasons? Obviously, I think it is, but just curious on when that would have happened.
Yeah, the other one that really stands out to me is like the Giallo movies and how they had kind of like that really weird soundtrack.
Yeah,
and so I think that was more like 60s, but
I can see that.
It was a different. It was, I guess, more to your point. Like, it's okay to do something completely different, and it won't necessarily make audiences not want to see the movie.
Doesn't always mean bad.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, there's a lot going on in this one, but Tina sure had the highs and lows towards the end of this one, didn't she?
Yeah, that was the that was the other thing that was kind of confusing, because it was just like, well, now you're just all of a sudden attracted to this man, but then you forget Dracula, even though this is Blacula, you know, they got the seduction down. Yeah.
But then, like, the cops accidentally shoot her, and so he kills the cop, and then she's dying, so he bites her so that she can live forever with him.
Yeah.
But then the cops accidentally stake her through the heart when they're trying to kill him. It was funny to me how the cops were, like, always wrong in this movie. And with, like, violent and deadly consequences, you know?
Yeah. That's a good point, actually, though. This is almost like a Romeo and Juliet thing in a way, because he was just like, my happiness is gone.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
I'm gonna go see what a sunrise looks like for the first time in, 200 years.
But he did take care of business first, because he was yelling at everybody, like, not one will escape my vengeance, no one will leave here alive. And then he just brutally murders white cops for like 10 minutes of movie time.
Yeah.
And then he confronts the final two people, and he's just like, okay, I'm done now, and walks out into the sunlight.
My favorite confrontation he had with a white cop was the one who shot Tina because he had a helmet on, like a motorcycle helmet. I think it was the one that shot Tina, and they're in the long, like, broiler room like hall, and there's like pipes on either side, and like it was throwing the cop to one side and to the other side, but because he was wearing a helmet, all you heard was like doing, doing, like his helmet was bouncing on. I was like, damn, that's actually really smart to still have your helmet on even though you're inside and they're heavy, and why would anyone want to wear them like that? Well, for that reason right there, to get your head kicked in.
Yeah,
that was my favorite one by far.
Yeah, and then I guess at the very ending, it even got a little body horror on us with when he was melting in the sun. Yeah, that was pretty gnarly practical effects on that one.
Yeah, with all the worms and everything in his. Yeah, I agree. I wondered. Nope. Sorry about showed my hands for next week's episode.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, and it also is really confusing to me because there was a sequel to this movie.
You know what's funny about this is the first time I watched it on Tubes, I fell asleep before it was over with. So I'm old. Mm-hmm. And I woke up at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and like it was like still Tubi was still playing. It would just like continue playing movies and everything. And I just had to today, I was like, I wonder what what played when I was like sleeping. And it was the second one. The second one played, and then a couple like Outer Limit episodes or something like that. But it was just like, oh damn, I technically watched that in my sleep.
Yeah.
But it was the same actor playing Blacula.
Yeah. Well, no, that's what I mean is like, it's the same guy. So it was weird to me that he just melted in the sun at the end of this one. I would have thought there would be some kind of more of like a setup for a sequel, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point.
He's like, he really tricked him, but
those are really good special effects. They didn't even happen for real.
Yeah. So anyway, this one was an adventure. I don't know. It was just kind of maybe one of the most unique takes on the vampire Count Dracula thing that we've seen in a while, just because it was in such like a different setting. I think the core elements were all pretty straightforward, but there was enough like extra added on top that it made it interesting to me.
I feel like this is better than, what was that one that we watched from was it from the 90s? Oh gosh.
Yeah.
It wasn't Wes Craven's.
It was Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, okay.
Stoker.
Yeah.
Bram Stoker's Dracula. Damn it.
Perfect. But in my opinion, it was better than that for sure. So
yeah,
I'll probably watch this again before not. Nope, just ruined it.
It's all good.
Nosferatu. No.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Isn't that movie coming out?
Oh, a new one? Yeah, sorry. I thought you were talking about the original. The original was good.
Oh, yeah. I'd watch Blacula over the new one just because I don't like new things.
There's a lot of... I feel like they're digging really deep into the horror back catalog for remakes these days, and I'm not quite here for it.
Maybe I'll bring another listener to the podcast. You're not welcome, other listener.
There can only be one.
Just
one. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I am getting old because I watched, two things. One, I watched this, and then I wanted to go watch Candyman. Mm-hmm. But just because it's been a while since I've seen it, and it's an older movie that I know is good. And then I recently went and saw the new Strangers Part 1. And leaving that, I was not excited for The Strangers Part 2. I just wanted to go home and watch The Strangers.
The new Strangers?
Yeah.
With the 3... Is this the prequel? Did that come out?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, I'm getting old. I don't even care. I didn't realize that already came out, though.
It came and went. That tells you about all you need to know.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. So, anyway, we made it. We did Blacula, talked about blaxploitation, and...
It's a wrap for the 70s, man.
Yeah, that's weird. We're all the way through the 70s, and next week we're going to be back with our first movie from the 1980s. And let me tell you, finding finding B horror movies from the 80s where I didn't immediately bail after reading the plot summary.
It's too saturated. Too saturated.
Yeah. There was a lot going on in the 80s, and there were no rules. So
fucking just living the dream.
Yeah.
The 80s are the reason why we're having to live the way we are in the 2024.
Well, the 80s make the 70s seem tame, and that's saying something.
It really does.
You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, glad you picked this one. That was one of the stronger choices of the season so far. And it's interesting, too, just that I feel like we're finally getting to the point where the movies being made don't feel like way, way, way worse than Hollywood movies.
Right.
Like there's enough going on with movie production and technology and everything else. And I guess probably at this point, because of independent distribution, there's more money flowing into it, which means you can spend more on the movies. You're not having to, do this on $20,000.
Yeah. And I also think that it kind of goes to show that you could put your whole ass into something, and doesn't, just because you don't have all the funding or anything, doesn't mean you can't accomplish what you're going to. Not to sound like a fucking cheesy or anything, but listener, if you're listening, do it. If you want to do it, do it. Do it yourself.
Don't take money from the Baptist Church or the Canadian government. Just get out there and grab your bag.
You damn right. And when in doubt, damn the man.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or hit us up on the IG. That's what the kids call Instagram. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.